Hey loves, welcome back to another episode of Women Between Worlds. It has been a while. It's actually been 9 months since my last full episode, and that feels really fitting right now. It feels like a gestation, like I've been growing something or getting ready to birth something, and it's really fitting for this episode today because I've been integrating how I want to show up here, how things have been moving in the online space. And this episode in itself feels like a rebirth. So, some of you might know I had a prophetic dream recently, and I dreamt about a travel I went on. I was traveling for 9 days, like in some kind of aeroplane, spaceship, something like that. You know how dreams are, right? So I was traveling for 9 days, and this dream, when I woke up from this dream, it really inspired me to take 9 whole days offline, 9 days off social media. And it's really interesting about the 9 months of since doing this episode, the 9 days in my prophetic dream. And then I was reflecting on how long I've been consistently showing up on social media. And it's been 9 years. It was in August 2016 that Instagram released Instagram stories. And because I am a true storyteller, I love showing up, I love connecting, I love telling stories. When Instagram stories was released, I was all over it, and I have gorgeous memories. And you know, when you search in your insights on your account, I can see all these stories and they come up like little circles in by date order. So my circles look like this, like full up, full up, full up. I have been sharing for 9 years without any intentional breaks. So if anyone is into numerology, I did a quick search as to what the significance of 999 is, because the 9 months since I did an episode, 9 days offline, and 9 years that I've been sharing and showing up until I took this break. And it says here that the significance of 999 energetically and archetypally is not a fluffy angel number, it's a completion portal. It's the end of a cycle, but the end of a cycle, not in a collapsing way, but in like the moment a snake sheds her skin, it says. So a cycle has fully completed with cell deep completion. And 999 is also the code of humanitarian service, devotion without martyrdom, leadership from the heart. We're going to be speaking about this: frequency, transmission, embodiment, and collective shifts. So I don't know. I don't know how true that is. If you are into numerology, you can let me know. But I thought this was really interesting because today's episode is all about how to stay open, and sensitive and creative without losing capacity, because we're living in a world that is really pulling our nervous systems in a way that we were never built for. You know, the world is, no matter how you feel your sensitivity, or whether you are neurodivergent, or whether you can identify with any kind of neurodivergent traits, we're living in a world that's really fast, it's really loud, it's really demanding, yet we, especially as women, are going through a massive shift and a massive rewiring at the same time. So we're in this kind of cocoon, this kind of container, where what's being asked of us, our nervous systems, and what we're being asked to hold has been very fast and very loud. And at the same time, we've got all of these things rising, like the rise of awareness in our sensitivity, the rise in the levels of diagnosis around neurodivergence, both in children and in adults and in women especially. And then we have another layer that I'm going to bring into the conversation today around women my age, women who are around 40 or in their 40s, and the shifts that we're going through with perimenopause. So let's just take a breath, because that's a lot, right? But what I want to really talk about today is what happens when we soften. What happens when we soften to meet this modern world, to meet this fast, busy, loud world, and how we can bring our hearts back online in a way that feels sustainable and safe. So let's begin. Okay, let's begin. So we're in this moment now of the world speeding up, of AI, of things rapidly changing. Let's just reflect for a moment on just even the last few decades. We don't need to go very far back. Let's reflect on the last few decades where women's roles in society have really shifted. Gone are the 1950s housewives, gone is the traditional, although we've had the return, like the trad wife and all of that, right? I was even kind of pulled into that for a little while myself. But we've had this real growth in women in the workplace, the return of power, both in the sense of status, authority, and money returning into the hands of women. And so for the last few decades, our mothers have been path breaking along this route of being career women, having success and showing up in the world differently. So that's new in the bigger timeline of humanity and our evolution. A few decades is nothing, right? So in the last few decades, we have been seeing the rise of feminine power. But the way that feminine power has been exhibited or modeled to us, or how that has looked like, has been in the form of endurance. It's come through a very masculine wave of performing, achieving, productivity. And whilst those elements are not in of themselves bad things, right? There's nothing wrong with productivity. There's nothing wrong with like pushing through and performing. Like, there is a time and a place for that. But what we're seeing is that's come at a cost, that has come at a cost. And this isn't just women, but today I'm speaking specifically about women and my own experience and my clients and the women around me. That's come at a cost of our well-being. It's come at a cost of our health, our mental health, our emotional health, and our bodies. And what that looks like, it looks like overwhelm, it looks like burnout. And burnout can come in all different ways. Burnout doesn't look like staying in bed all day, although it can also look like that. But burnout and the way that the body whispers and then begins to cry and scream, as often is the case, comes in many different forms. It might come in the way that we can never relax. Right? Burnout might come in the form of a lot of mental chatter, of problems showing up in our sleep, in our weight, in all kinds of ways our bodies begin to communicate. So when I speak to burnout or when I speak to overwhelm, it's not this end place that a woman gets to, although that does happen. It's an accumulation and a process and a lifestyle that we are putting up with, yeah, that we are coping with, that we are surviving within. So we are being asked, I really feel, and especially with my break from social media over these, what was 9 days in my prophetic dream became 11 days. We are really being called here now to build in a new way, to build with a new kind of power, one that's rooted in our sensitivity, in our intuition, and is body based, with us rooted and regulated. So I want to speak to that. And when I was considering having this time off social media, right? So I just want to put in context. I have had time off social media before, and I have had time off my phone, but most of these times have been centered around something that was happening in my life. So maybe something was happening in my personal life. Occasionally, over the last 9 years, there have been things in my personal life that have pulled me away from showing up, not for very long. When I look back, really not for very long, but there have been moments in time, like I had a miscarriage 2 years ago, and I've moved countries, I've had multiple house moves in that time. There have been things that have pulled me away where I haven't been as present. But I'd never taken this very conscious choice to take myself away, other than times when I was in processes like in a retreat or working with something really specific where I wanted to combine that with not being on my phone or not being on social media. So this was the very first time that I'd chosen a really specific intention of, I'm going to come off social media for no other reason than just coming off social media. Yeah. I am going to live my normal life, my daily life, and still use my phone. This wasn't about my phone. Still use my phone, still show up for my clients, and do the school run and all of these things. I'm just not going to go on social media. This was the kind of experiment and the nudge that I received to do. And one of the big things that has helped me as a mother, so I'm a mum to two kids, something that's really helped me with my evolution, my self-awareness, and my ability to grow and recognize where I am not taking care of myself, has been through the mirror of motherhood. So there have been times in my life where things have been happening for my children and I've given them advice, or I've wanted certain things for them. And then I've reflected and realized that I'm not putting myself to the same standards. And that really, that really hit me. That was so powerful for me, because if I wanted certain things for my children, I'll give you an example in a minute. If I wanted certain things for my children, why was I accepting less for myself? Like where was that coming from? So one of the things that I was really clear about as a mother was social media for my children. And my daughter, who's nearly 21, didn't have, when she was a tween, a preteen, Snapchat was just coming out. TikTok was called Musically, and like so, we've been through this kind of integration of having a teenager and now an adult, a grown woman daughter, and social media. So I've had some experience of this, and at the moment, my youngest, my son, is 11 years old. And so we've had conversations. We've had these conversations over the last few years. It's nothing new. So he can be prepared, and he knows how we feel and how we manage this as a family. He knows he is not having social media. He doesn't have a phone. He doesn't need a phone. And if he does need a phone, he'll have a little flip brick phone. But he's not having social media until minimum 14. And I might even revise that, but minimum 14. So this has been something as a mother I've been so clear about for my children. I have done research, I've studied, um, I've understood the power and the impact of social media on developing brains, particularly on brains that are going through puberty, brains that are going through big evolutionary shifts, right? Not evolutionary, but on a personal level, evolutionary shifts that are in developing bodies and brains that impact. And I think I'm not going to go into that because I think we all know what that is. I could give you some reminders, but the statistics are harrowing. They're absolutely harrowing, the impact on girls and boys. Boys now are suffering from more body image issues and self-esteem issues than ever before. And social media has a lot to do with that. So we do understand the impact and the negative impact that social media is having on our children. And then what about us? What about us? Do we think we are immune to this? Right? So I was having this dream, and my son was there in this prophetic dream that I had. My son was traveling with me for it was this really long, so the feeling of the dream was, it was a really long time, but it was really worth it. It was this journey we were going on, and this, whatever we were traveling in, it was an aeroplane or a spaceship. It didn't look like an aeroplane, but it very much had the idea that we were not leaving this vehicle, this transport, for the whole 9 days, and we had to be there. And yeah, there was a lot of pieces to this dream, which would never make sense if I try and tell you. But I had this dream about these 9 days, and there was something really interesting that occurred to me when I was thinking about this mirroring of motherhood, of how the developing brains of my children had been so important to me, and something else that's been really prominent in my life recently, which is perimenopause. So perimenopause has been, I'm 46 right now. Perimenopause has been something I've been interested in and paying attention to for a number of years. I had a time when I went through what I would call a bit of denial. There's a real rebel in me that doesn't like following the trends, and it's like everyone's talking about perimenopause, everyone's blaming things on perimenopause, their energy, their fatigue, their brain fog, their weight gain. And I was there thinking, that's not going to happen to me. That's not going to be me, because I'm going to be one of those people. I'm fit and healthy. I've been teaching health and wellness for a long time. That's not going to happen to me. And then perimenopause has been happening to me. And then I have been moving through and kind of integrating those feelings of it is becoming a trend, and we have to be cautious about what we're blaming things on, whilst also recognizing that it's really real. So when I dove deep into perimenopause, I'm really interested in the brain and neuroscience as well as the body, is I began to understand that perimenopause is a rewiring of the brain. Perimenopause is more than just a hormonal event. Like, we often think of this as happening in the ovaries or something that has something to do with our reproduction system, when really perimenopause is a neuroendocrine event. It's happening in the brain, it's happening in the endocrine system. And so as I began to do deeper research in the rewiring of a woman's brain during perimenopause, and this happens during puberty, during pregnancy, and during perimenopause, we see a huge rewiring in terms of brain regions, connectivity, hormonal signaling, right? The systems that our bodies and our brains use begins to shift in perimenopause. And it's a big, big shift. We see changes in, not only hormonal changes, but we see shifts in areas of the brain that respond to bonding, that respond to fawning and caregiving. And so perimenopause is a brain event, right? Not just a hormonal event. And so this has been an area I've been really interested in, on the women's health side, on the anatomy side, on the well-being side, and my own personal experience. And then thinking about not wanting social media to be having such a big impact on the developing brains of my children. How does that fit when I am going through my own brain rewiring during perimenopause? What does that mean? And so straight off, one of the biggest things that I noticed from my 9, which became 11, from my 11 days off of social media, was a lot of the symptoms that I had been experiencing that felt like they fitted in the perimenopause box of symptoms, like brain fog, a kind of like cloudiness, that feeling of not being able to find a word, like when the brain is just not quite firing. It feels like the brain isn't firing right, and you're just like, what is the word for that? Didn't happen to me at all, right? It didn't happen to me at all in those 11 days. And what I experienced was a lot more clarity. I experienced a feeling of being so much more grounded and in my body. And I experienced a feeling of being able to listen and tune into my own voice. So I have been really interested in this, is not only as my personal experience, but how that fits in with what we're seeing with the neuro reprogramming during perimenopause, and the effect that things like social media could be having on us during that time, right? So something that, if you are a woman in that phase of life, in your late 30s or in your 40s and beyond, it's something to really sit with and consider, because it's not just vulnerable young minds that are being impacted here. What about us being able to tune into our own truth, our own soul that's wanting to speak to us? So that was one of the biggest things that came up. Something else that I noticed in my time off, having had these 9 consistent years with hardly any break was a lot of naivety. Noticing a lot of naivety in myself, which, could be strange to hear from a 46-year-old woman, and a woman that has survived and coped and been successful in life, in business, in many different ways. But at what cost and using what strategies is the question I've been asking myself over the last few years. So it may be strange to hear me talk about naivety and innocence because I've been through a lot of things. There's a lot of trauma in my past. There's a lot of really difficult things I've been through. A lot of difficult things I've been through. And there were times on social media where I shared really intimate, deep journeys that I was going on from a space of such pure intention, such innocence. So I had my breast implants removed in 2018, and I shared so much around the process before the surgery, just after the surgery, like the day I had the surgery and I woke up and I opened my eyes, I was sharing, and I was sharing my scars and my healing process. And at that time, well, I feel quite emotional. There was so many women contacted me, so many women, especially on Instagram. So many women contacted me and said, "Thank you for sharing your story. I've never thought about this, and I'm having these symptoms from my breast implants." And there were whole groups on Facebook. There were groups of thousands of women experiencing breast implant illness. And as someone who loves sharing and enjoys storytelling and enjoys speaking from the heart, I went live in these groups and I spoke to thousands of women about my breast implant journey, and it touched so many women. I did a piece for the newspaper, and there was many things that I shared that had a huge effect, but also naively, well, I guess naively, and also a little bit of not wanting to face that. There were people there, mostly men, who were looking at my shares, my stories, my videos in the spaces. Like the Facebook group was private, right? That was a group of women. But looking at those things with different eyes. Yeah, looking at those shares, pictures of my, not that I shared my breasts, but I was sharing like how they looked before, how they looked after, how they we have to cover certain things on social media, like this part of the breast. But there was a lot of quite explicit nature of my shares. And then I went through a process of body transformation and bikini. I did a bikini competition, a fitness competition, where you stand on stage and you wear like the tiniest bikini, like the tiniest thing. There was times when I was trying on the bikini, like especially the lower part of the bikini, just thinking like, this is the tiniest piece of fabric. How is it going to cover anything? And I shared openly so much of that journey, and many of my followers and the eyes on me were people that were interested in that for other reasons than the intention that I had. Yeah. And so although I did reach many women and inspired many women, and again, I got, it was the messages where people would watch a video or see a share from my story, and or one of the emails that I would send out. And it was women replying to those things and telling me the impact it had had on them that always kept me going and really fueled me over those years, because those were difficult times I was moving through. Like there was some amazing stuff happening. There was stuff, being on stage felt amazing. The whole body transformation journey was incredible, but it was the messages from women and occasionally from men, right? I don't want to make it like a men against women thing, but there were messages from people that would really keep me going. But there was a naivety to me at that time, or a denial, where I did not fully recognize the cost of that visibility, the cost energetically, like on an energetic, spiritual, emotional level, and the cost on a physical level to my nervous system and my body. And there is something that I have never openly spoken about, and I won't go into detail, but at one point I was in a position where I found myself with quite a serious situation with a stalker where the police had to get involved in that situation. And that really marked a turning point for me in my understanding of safety and my energy online. And so when that happened, there was a little shift for me in my energy, and there was like a kind of an awakening and an awareness around this exposure on this energetic level and how that could actually impact me in ways that I hadn't fully taken on board. So the purpose of this episode today, speaking about how can we show up with our hearts online in a heart-led way, with all of like the, when I say heart-led, it doesn't mean that it's not fucking feisty and fierce, right? This doesn't mean like just because of the heart, it doesn't mean it's all like soft and love, and it is those things, but also it's like, yeah, my fucking heart is online. Like, this is my truth. This is my soul. This is the voice that I want to speak. It's this connection between, the heart and the voice and all of these pieces coming together, integrating them. How do we stay open and authentic in a space that has these risks, in this space that's impacting our neurology, that's impacting our endocrine system, our nervous system, that's impacting us on a spiritual level as well? As our mothers and the women moved through and created like this new world that we're living in right now, where women are moving into spaces with more power, where women are earning more money, and all of this massive shift that we've seen with feminine leadership, social media is new. Social media is a new tool, and with AI and with the world moving so quickly, we are going to have to deal with more. There is more coming, there are more shifts, and the impact on our bodies is, in my opinion, and I think we can all agree, is getting harder, is getting more intense, not less intense, not getting easier, it's not getting more relaxing, it's not getting more yeah. I believe it's only going to get more intense, at least for the next few years, for however long. So how are we going to deal with that? Because what can happen is we can contract, right? The danger isn't just like, oh, what will happen to us? Like, our brains get affected or we might get a stalker. It's like, that's not the lesson. The danger, that's not the danger. The danger is we can collapse. We can contract. And when we collapse and we contract energetically, we aren't operating from our hearts. Yeah. And the world needs us in our hearts. It needs the women operating from their bodies, their hearts, their wombs, their intuition. This is actually what's needed. So I had some reflections in this time off about how I had like managed and how I had success in my career and as a single mom. And this, I used to have this really strong woman um persona, a mask that I wore. People would tell me, like, I remember times in my life where I'd be struggling and I'd reach out for support from people, and they would say, you'll be fine, Sarah, you'll be fine. You're such a strong woman, you're so strong, you'll be fine, you've always been fine. And whilst that was true, it wasn't helpful, and it wasn't what I wanted to hear, and it wasn't what I needed to hear, because that just kept that mask, from slipping. It was like people were telling me, Sarah, don't let your mask slip. Come on, like, come on, show us this face that is that pushes. Show us this version of you that knows how to survive, the fighter, the warrior woman. And whilst I love those archetypes and I love those versions of me, and she still is me, I'm still the warrior, the queen, like all of these archetypes are still here, right? Then none of them are bad, but she was always leading. And so when she was always leading, I was always leading from the energy of defend, defend, protect, survive, even when I didn't need to, even when there were no threats, when there was no danger, when money was coming in, when there was a lot of love in my life, when things were going well, there was still this energy of being able to defend, being the warrior, right? Being in the mind and really ignoring the body. So I love that strong woman in me. And the last few years have taught me so much in removing some of that armor that I'd been wearing. And then I felt really vulnerable because when you remove that armor that's been so useful for you, you feel a bit naked, like you feel a bit exposed. How do I move forward from here? Or maybe there are times when I need to put the armor on again. When are those times? Or maybe I don't need the armor at all. I just need to develop strategies so that I don't have to go into battle all the time, right? So I have been building now from a completely new way of being with these layers of removing these layers of defense, especially as I've been discovering more about my neurodivergence. I'm currently in the process of my official diagnosis. I've got a report coming that will give all the details of, like, how much is autism, ADHD, and what my different areas are. There's some interesting things that have come up for me during the diagnostic process, which has been so different from just associating with certain traits, right? And being like, yeah, I can see that autistic trait in me, or I can see that ADHD trait in me, but actually going through the diagnostic process has been a complete game changer. So the question I've been asking myself, and I want you to ask yourself from watching this today, is like, how can I show up in a way, and what do I need to show up in a way where I can really connect with my true strength, my heart strength, my feminine power, my intuition, my knowing, my body. A lot of that comes from the body, from being in the body and being connected to the body. How can I show up with that and also be the leader, the creator, right? How can I lead with sovereignty rather than survival energy? And I see this in women, the women that I work with, my friends, people in my circles. I see this energy of, no matter how much money you make, where your business gets to, or, whatever success on paper a woman has, there are so many women still operating from survival energy, not operating from their heart. And that eventually takes a toll, that eventually has a cost. And that cost is getting more and more expensive, right? That cost is showing up more and more as the pace gets faster and faster. So in these 9 days that I had, I really honored the spaciousness. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to leave you with as things for you to contemplate on that have been really powerful for me. One is the spaciousness that I need. I need so much space, more space than I feel the average person or average woman, if there ever was such one, needs in order to just do life. I need time alone. I need time in my own energy. I love people. I love people. I love my work. I love my clients. I love, being around others. And I also really need space. And modern life is not built for that, right? So we have to make some changes because I can't wait for the world to change and give me the environment that I need to thrive. So I have to be the driver of this. So I've been claiming that the last few years, which is I need spaciousness. And how do I get to create that for myself? What do I need to do and how do I create it? So some questions for you to sit with. And how do I make sure I am tuning into this new archetypal energy? And what does this new archetypal energy look like? Because we've seen the boss babe archetype. Like, we know the boss babe, which was essentially like a woman showing up as if she was a man, a woman showing up, pushing through, being consistent. Men's bodies work on a 24-hour energy basis. This is biology. This isn't about gender. It's not about sexism. It's biology. Men's bodies operate with their cortisol and their hormones on a day-to-day basis primarily. Women's bodies do not. Women's bodies are cyclical. They are seasonal. Women's bodies are responding to the moon. to the tide, right? Men's bodies are to some extent, but we are more sensitive to this. Our body systems flow and react and are in open communication with this, right? So when we see women showing up in life as mums, as business owners, as leaders, with this masculine energy that's about consistency, that's about go, 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 push, 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 perform, 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 produce, 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 this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable for women. It's barely sustainable for men. Men are affected by this patriarchal culture too, but it's very unsustainable for a woman's body. And if you add in layers of neurodivergence and you add in perimenopause, or you add in caring for elderly parents, or you add in a divorce or a health condition, right, then it becomes really obvious just how unsustainable it is to operate from that energy. So we need to, what is the new archetype? Who do you know? Who do you follow online? Are you following people, women online that are operating from this energy, that are cyclical, that are showing how to be successful, how to lead, how to run a business, how to show up as a woman with power, whilst also honoring that cyclical, seasonal energy that is innate? It's who we are, it's our wiring, and it's also our magic and our power. That's what makes us so powerful, and that's what the world really needs right now. The world really needs to, we need more balance. Productivity, pushing, performing, all of these things are not bad, they're not wrong in my world. They're just out of balance. They're so out of balance. And social media and phones and AI is adding another layer to this, which is it's always on. The apps are always on. The lights that are always on. Supermarkets are always open. Like everything in life right now is reflecting to us, it's mirroring to us what's happening in our internal worlds. Like we're always on, we're overriding our instincts, we're overriding our need for rest, we're overriding our need to our innate cyclical nature, right? So when I say women need to bring their hearts back online, it's really hard to be activated in the heart space when the body is under stress, when the body is operating from cortisol, when the body is in this push push performance mode. And you might get glimpses, right? I see a lot of women I really admire in the business space, and I see like glimpses of them in their heart spaces, and it's really beautiful. It's really gorgeous. And I'm like, wow, yes, this is what we need. But then because our culture, again, is like not holding space for women to be able to have this more cyclical, seasonal, flowing energy, I see them pushing, I see them in overdrive. And at some point, I don't know any woman in the space that has not had a huge setback at some point from overriding her body signals. And so it's happened to me. There's no judgment. It's happened to me. And my body has always been my biggest teacher. I say my body is like the canary in the coal mine because I'm so sensitive and I love my sensitivity. It's hard, right? It's hard being a really sensitive woman, and it's a huge rebirth. I began this episode today talking about like this is a rebirth for me, and I have been shedding this strong woman uh, identity for a long time, for years. And I'm really owning it now. Like I'm really owning the powerful version of me that's re-emerging in a new way. It's like she's not the strong woman, but she's a powerful woman. And the difference there is like the strength doesn't come from being a warrior and pushing through. Yes, I am that, and I'm still that, and I'll always be that. But the powerful feminine energy comes from my sensitivity. It comes from my ability to be able to feel my heart. And sometimes that's so sad. Like sometimes it's really painful. It really hurts. But it's so exquisite, right? So if there's a part of you, if you're listening to this, you are probably and potentially also very exquisitely sensitive, intuitive, creative, and maybe that part of you has been hiding. Maybe she's had to, maybe that softness once felt unsafe. And the world that we're building really needs her. It really needs her now, and it needs that frequency. That is what's next. So, as we begin to wrap up, if you are watching this podcast in November, I'm recording it in November, I am inviting you to the Winter Reset, which is a gorgeous workshop, an immersion, a 2-hour immersion that I'm running on the 4th of December about microdosing as modern magic. Microdosing has been something that has been such an incredible way for me to relax into my softness, to remember and rewire and rebuild my capacity to be open and alive. And this new identity that I have been rebirthing, that a lot of this work has come from me connecting with the mushroom, psilocybin, and microdosing. So I'm running a workshop called the Winter Reset on the 4th of December. There'll be details for you to come and join me. I invite you to join me on that gorgeous workshop. And I just want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for being here and for being part of this with me, and this conversation about being able to stay open, to be able to be sensitive without losing capacity feels, just feels so important to have right now, because there's big shifts coming, and being able to be in capacity and be in the heart space and operate from softness will become more and more evident as to why it's so important as we move through these times that are coming. So in the next episode, I will be sharing more about the tools that have helped me to come back into capacity, that have helped me restore my rhythm. I'll be sharing more specifically about microdosing, not as like an escape or not as a productivity tool, but as a tool of remembrance for women, a tool of remembrance for the body, the heart, the mind that's just longing for spaciousness, for restoration and clarity and reconnection. So we'll be exploring that in the next episode, why this medicine speaks so deeply to the feminine nervous system and how it can support us in these transitions in life. So if you are feeling that pull, then my upcoming workshop, Winter Reset, Microdosing as Modern Magic, is where we'll go deeper into this, and you'll find details in the show notes and more in the next episode. So as always, thank you for listening and walking this path with me, Women Between Worlds, and for being part of this circle. I will see you in the next episode.